I'm James Derek Lomas, an assistant professor at TU Delft, as he said. My work has been focusing on AI for well-being. And so I'm going to deconstruct that a little bit, what I mean. But I thought that I'd start off with just a few recent projects because it's nice to show, not tell. And just for my own convenience, I'm going to be showing all my windows and not going into presentation mode. I hope that's all right. So this was a recent graduation project from last year that helps to show a more traditional AI system and how it can support well-being in the visually impaired.
Independence. The dictionary defines it as the ability to live your life without being helped or influenced by others.
It could also mean the ability to discover a whole new recipe.
Chicken and pumpkin soup.
Soup ingredients.
It could also mean submitting an assignment just before the deadline.
It could be sharing a laugh with a colleague near the coffee machine.
Looks like Alex from finance.
To step out for some fresh air and roam the streets without any worry.
Looks like a body of water running through a grassy field.
Or just managing to catch that train during rush hour.
1541, Sprinter, Amsterdam Central, via Mariahof.
To be able to sort and read my own letters.
Credit card statement, Post Box 289.
To be able to pop quickly into my favorite local store.
Mango chutney.
It is to know that when I get stuck, I have people to call upon.
Hey, yes, Sam, where are you?
Hey there, there seems to be a roadblock here. Can you help me out?
I can help you out. Do you want to use like a roadmap or something?
Okay, wait, I'll share my location.
All hands meeting, Tulip 3 meeting room.
Tulip 3.
To be surrounded by great people and be surprised by their love.
Looks like a birthday cake with lit candles.
To cook my favorite meal that my lovely family can't get enough of.
To push my physical limits. To move, to jump, to punch, and to feel alive.
I wish you the happiest year ahead.
To be me. To be Parham Dustar.
To be me, to be Jesse Wienolds.
To be me, to be Joy Barry.
Introducing Envision Glasses, the new AI-powered smart glasses by Envision, empowering the blind and visually impaired to be more independent. Available for pre-order now.
So this is a result of a human-centered design process and engaging with the existing computer vision systems. And what was brilliant about this project for me was the way in which it incorporated humans in the loop. So this system was entirely around increasing the autonomy of visually impaired people, but it didn't seek to operate entirely through the computer vision system. It assumed that the computer vision would fail on occasion, and therefore created a user experience with the Google Glass that would make it seamless to call in a friend or colleague to help out when the AI wasn't working. And so this involvement of people in AI systems, I think, is really important and exemplary in this project. So I'm going to shift gears for a second and share a little bit more about my conceptualization of AI, because what is the AI that we're referring to when we're talking about AI? It differs. I mean, people have different perspectives on this. But this is a nice list of everyday AI, the sort of things that we do every day. And one outlier here is autopilot. And not necessarily the Tesla autopilot, but autopilot like has been used in planes since 1914. So if autopilot is an example of artificial intelligence, and if autopilot was first used in 1914, how does that make any sense if that's before digital computers were invented? And that's because if we look at the contemporary definitions of artificial intelligence, such as Peter Norvig, the research director at Google, it's the ability to select an action that's expected to maximize a performance measure. And it's oriented around optimization. And so for me, I view cybernetics as the kind of core theoretical grounding for artificial intelligence. AI is great in grant applications. That's what the word was invented for, but it's quite vague. And so what I value about cybernetics is the conciseness of the concepts of these learning loops between perception and action. And in my own work, thinking about things as smart systems from a human-centered design perspective, where what are we trying to do? We're trying to assess needs, we're trying to do something about them, and we're not trying to necessarily take people out of the information feedback loop. We're trying to integrate people and machines together so that we can use data to inform actions. And specifically, the notion of well-being, it's not much different. We're trying to assess well-being needs, and we're trying to do something about them. And we're trying to create human machine systems that can support that kind of feedback. So I'm going to jump over and give another example. A recent project that used generative adversarial networks to produce some pretty stunning experiences. So this graduation project tried to use artificial intelligence to create human experiences in order to affect climate change, recognizing that some of the greatest barriers to realizing the climate change we want to see are human attitudes. And so he explored how these GAN-generated images could evoke positive feelings of fascination for the climate rather than fear. And is another example where the purpose of the artificial intelligence is really to create changes at the human level. This is another example, a smart wheelchair, looking at how do we measure, how do we define metrics for behaviors of wheelchair users that are associated with wheelchair user well-being. And this includes different postures as well as different exercises. And again, trying to create a feedback loop between those measures and the behaviors using an app. So this all gives a sort of broad view of the type of work that we do at TU Delft around human-centered design and artificial intelligence. And the primary work that I'd like to share today has to do with well-being during COVID-19, because this is not a small challenge. So over the past year, we've done, well, now three periods of assessment. This presentation will talk about the first two that involved, it's your basic survey. So reaching out to all 25,000 students, 6,000 staff, and trying to create a system that can support well-being through administrative action. And so just a little bit of a breakdown of why well-being is important in education. First of all, it's an input. It's hard to learn well when you don't feel well, but it's also an objective of education. Education is better when the students graduate with a high level of well-being. And normally, you can assess a student's well-being or a colleague's well-being just through interaction. I mean, you can tell if they're a bit down or if they're having some troubles, but that's not really possible when we don't see people anymore except on Zoom. And so our goal was really to create more of a university scale approach for systematically assessing well-being. And so we leaned on a number of different models of well-being, and again, try to create our cybernetic loop for assessing well-being needs and then doing something about them. We wanted to create a system that would lower the barrier for participation and provide a human touch. And the most important thing, which is different from most surveys, is that it was supposed to be actionable. It wasn't about the validity of the constructs measured. It was, how well will this enable administrators to take action? And so just briefly, this is the sort of thing it looked like. It was a relatively short survey that captured a broad range of information. And this feedback loop, which I encourage thinking about through the lens of artificial intelligence, because, well, broadly speaking, we want artificial intelligence to support human well-being. That's pretty clear. And at the same time, the institutions that we've created don't necessarily have that objective. And well, I believe they should. I think increasingly there's a shift from GDP and other financial growth measures to thinking about well-being as the growth that we want to see in different sectors of society. But how to create humanized institutions that can support well-being needs has parallels with how we create humanized AI systems that can support human well-being. And so in our case, there's a lot of messiness. There are a lot of different human parts where data comes in and requires human touch. From the sending of the survey, the analysis that's being done, and then these well-being design workshops that I'll briefly discuss, and then the actual administrative actions. So this is just to share the kinds of changes that are taking place. Surprisingly, in March, I don't have the data up here, but in the most recent survey, we had a much bigger drop in well-being from November than from November to last June. That was a little bit surprising, but I guess after a cold February, it's not so surprising. Let me jump ahead here. So the community-led analysis of the data is really an important aspect of this, because one thing we definitely wanted to avoid was delivering a survey and having it sit on a shelf. And so in this case, we wanted to involve the community both in the production of the survey that we did. We had a very large set of students participating in the definition of the constructs that we wanted to measure. So this is what let us come up with factors that are not common in well-being assessments, like the quality of your home working environment, which highly predicts student well-being at this time. But also in the analysis of the data, because we're trying to translate the data into meaningful actions and getting human insight into the nature of that data so that actions can be taken is critical. And so we had a set of these different stakeholder workshops where we looked at the quantitative data, but we also had dozens of people read through thousands of responses to be able to identify needs that weren't currently being captured by the survey, and also to generate ideas for the administration that they might take. This all produced a set of concrete guidance for different parts of the university, everything from counseling services to the education teams, and direct communication to students and staff. And then a number of different follow-up actions that were administratively implemented. This has also been published in a report in the Netherlands. And so this is a jumping off point for me to think about the future of artificial intelligence, because it's difficult today for people to align on values and for people to understand human needs at large scale. And as we think about ways of automating that, what I'd really encourage is not thinking about automating it, but rather thinking about facilitating it. So how can we use artificial intelligence to help support these existing human systems, but rather than trying to keep people out of those feedback loops, using the artificial intelligence to create more meaningful touch points in that experience. So now I'm going to show just, let's see, what would be one other one that I could give a jumping off point for. Because in as much as there are many opportunities at an institutional level and sort of systemic level for supporting well-being, there are also a lot of opportunities at an individual level. And so we've been doing a lot of work recently on the use of EEG and other biosensors to create these feedback loops around positive affect and even spiritual experiences. So I have a graduation student now that's using breath techniques in conjunction with EEG to try to help support spiritual well-being. However, he ends up defining that construct in his work. But this is just trying to broaden out the scope of places of intervention for where artificial intelligence might play a role in the future of human well-being. So because I'm primarily interested in the social aspects of this, I thought that I could now take some questions and we could get a discussion going.
Yes, then if you can unshare your screen and present everything you have so far, then let me glance at the chat if we have incoming questions. We have not so far, so let me then ask one of my own. So in the beginning, you showed these examples of, tools like the Google Glasses and the smart wheelchair and how they interact and change our interaction with the world. Where do you see the integration of, artificial systems with human senses and perception? Is it only, the more sensory level? Is it, enhancing sensory or perceptual capacities, or being just a tool? And maybe you can elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so the key aspect of any of the projects have to do with taking a construct within well-being. We're trying to support well-being in some way or another, right? I mean, that's what we're geared to do as individuals, and increasingly geared to do as a society. And we're trying to figure out how to make it measurable. And we're trying to make sure that those measures are actually aligned to the values that we have. That process itself is challenging and requires input from multiple stakeholders. So what we view as appropriate posture for wheelchair users is disputable. and making sure that this is something that's open to dispute and open to more human input is critical in the creation of a system that would actually generate well-being and not just maximized responses. Because that's what AI, broadly speaking, through this cybernetics framework is very good at. It's very good at maximizing values of whatever has been defined as the value, but using human-centered methods to ensure the alignment of how people are feeling about those values with the actual measurements is tricky. Like there's not a one way to do it. And anyone who's familiar with Goodwin's law, that the measures that are targets can get corrupted very easily. It takes continuous alignment.
Yeah,
so
the idea of aligning it with well-being is quite interesting, because that seems to, you seem to focus on, and think so that's your idea on, advancing the capabilities and of these systems, and then, think about, okay, what are moral, ethical consequences of them, but like think about the user in a more, some systematic way is quite interesting. And then my next question would be, is there one technology you think that really pushes that front, that can be really well aligned, or is in some other way, the other extreme would be interesting as well, it's very badly aligned with the well-being?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be thinking of it maybe less from a technology perspective than from a process perspective. There are a lot of technologies I'm really excited about using from a data capture perspective. There are a lot of different potential metrics in EEG and different biosensing capacities. As we look at, so earlier, my hair is a bit messy because I just had the EEG cap on. We're doing these breath therapy sessions, and we're trying to identify metrics that are associated with some of the quote unquote altered states associated with breath therapy, because it's part of the goal. You have a great breath therapist and you come out feeling very different. And we want to understand what are the different metrics and measures that are associated with those positive feelings that can result. And that's an open fishing expedition. But the technology can help provide some of those measures, but it's a process. It's a human-centered process that I'm excited about for the alignment, for making sure that there are, because there's way too much trust in measurement. I love measurement. I mean, you can measure anything, but you have to always know there's error, and you always have to know that there's it's so easy to misalign. And I think that sometimes we can become so enamored with what the technology can do that we kind of gloss over some of the ways in which it can delude us into thinking that we're producing actual value. When I'll give an example. YouTube Kids. You're familiar with YouTube Kids? It's a steaming pile of shit. I have kids, and it's not something I would want them to, and the reason is that they just tried to automate the whole damn thing. If they just hired some good educators to curate a little bit, maybe they could help them out. Maybe they could produce some automated methods of surfacing good material for childhood educators to curate. But by trying to take people out of the whole system, they've made something that's just filled with questionable content, and not questionable like there's sex or violence or whatever. I mean, they can somehow manage that, but there's so much garbage. And so I really worry that in trying to automate, we can lose sight of how easy it can be to involve people. And that the point is not to exclude people from the process. It's to make the things people are doing more meaningful and more efficient.
Yeah, I think that's a very good example. Do you have like one technology, maybe to conclude, that you think would be best suited for that purpose? You know, you had Google Glasses, you had the wheelchair. Do you think the Google Glasses are better than the wheelchair in this sense to can enhance well-being even more, or maybe that's or the breath technique, maybe that's a better comparison. And the Google Glass, do you think that's one of these technologies will push well-being even further now than the other?
Well, gaining more self-insight, I think, is really valuable. So it was one of the things we were optimizing for in the creation of the wellness check survey. Is we wanted to design a measurement experience where people came out the other side feeling better and having more insight around themselves. And it's tricky at times to point at something like a survey and saying, look, this is AI. Well, I mean, it is insofar as measurement's a part of AI, and insofar as these feedback loops are part of AI. But the point I'm trying to make is that the self-insight, where we can learn more about ourselves, what makes ourselves tick, and to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror a little bit better, gain a sort of higher sense of self-awareness, is something I think we can anticipate. We see ourselves on the screen, we see ourselves interacting with others much more often in the past couple of years than before. I mean, we can review how we interacted on Zoom. We will probably be seeing ourselves more in other types of cameras as well. And like a golfer looking at their swing and trying to make improvements, I wouldn't be surprised at all if there will be more feedback loops between data that's collected around us and our own reflection upon it.
That's exciting. Let us know once we can use your devices and increase our well-being. We will come around.
Yeah, come to Delft. I'll just give this one last example. So this is the resonance pod. And it's a pod that was designed, and it was featured at Dutch Design Week last year for supporting a sort of self-contained breath therapy in an office setting. And so there are lots of fun things to check out here. So do come visit if people travel ever again.